welcome everyone to Phillies Extra, the baseball show from the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'm your host, Scott Lauber, and I'm thrilled to be joined this week by my guest, Phillies pitching coach, Caleb Cotham. We'll get to my interview with Caleb in a moment, but I'd like to start with this. The Phillies had 4 pitching coaches in 4 seasons from 2017 to 2020. And no matter who was in the job, Bob McClure, Rick Kranitz, Chris Young, or Brian Price, the team didn't finish better than 17th in the league in ERA. Now, a lot of that had to do with the roster, of course, but there was also an undeniable lack of continuity within the pitching department. I used to talk to Aaron Nola about this. McClure and Kranitz were old school, in Nola's words. Young's approach was rooted in data and analytics. Price was more in line with McClure and Kranitz. And if you were a Phillies pitcher, well, you were getting different messages from different people with different approaches all the time. Price stepped down after the short 2020 season, which was a time of great uncertainty for the organization. The Phillies removed Matt Klentak as general manager, and while they were interviewing candidates, they hired Cotham as the pitching coach. At the time, here's what we knew. He was only 33 years old. He'd been the assistant pitching coach for the Reds, where he worked for Derek Johnson, his pitching coach at Vanderbilt. He had a brief major league career that was short-circuited by injuries and a background with Driveline, the data-driven training center in Seattle. There were plenty of reasons to be skeptical, but I remember someone in the front office telling me that they thought Cotham had a chance to be a really good pitching coach. 4 years later, I'd argue that he's as big a reason why the Phillies have risen to one of the best teams in baseball. The pitching staff has improved every year, going from 19th in the majors in ERA in 2021 to tied for 17th, 12th, and then 11th last year. Zack Wheeler has worked with Cotham to add a sweeper and a splitter. He went from being very good to probably the best pitcher in baseball. Ranger Suarez and Christopher Sánchez have developed into quality major league starters. The Phillies are widely praised within the sport for keeping pitchers healthy. Here's what Wheeler told me about Cotham. He just tightened everything up for me because I always had a good fastball, but off speed's always been a struggle. When I don't have the good fastball, where can I get swings and misses? I can rely on the off speed now because I know it can get me through for the most part. He's probably taught me the most about pitching. High praise from Wheeler, to be sure. So when you sit down with Cotham, there's a lot to talk about. We got into some of the changes in the Phillies pitching department since he took over, what makes Wheeler great, and more. And we really only scratched the surface. Cotham agreed to come back another time, and I'm definitely going to hold him to it. You'll see why as we get into our conversation with Caleb Cotham. Welcome to Phillies Extra. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Scott. Excited.
It's impossible for me to explain how busy this time of year is for you, but I think maybe I can paint a rough picture. There are 35 pitchers, I think, in big league camp right now with the Phillies, and every day they all have to either play catch or throw bullpens or get into games. They're all working on different things, whether it's new pitches or tweaking an existing pitch or doing something mechanical. And they're all doing this while trying to stay healthy at this kind of still early stage in camp. And there's one person who has to stage manage all of it. So when I say that I appreciate your time, it feels like a tremendous understatement because I know how precious that time is. So I'll start with this. You're going into your 5th season as a pitching coach here. And look, the results speak for themselves, right? Like the ERA, the team ERA has improved every year. The rotation's become one of the best. Handful, 2 or 3 in the big leagues. Last year, you guys accounted for, I think, almost 20% of the complete games thrown in the majors. But if I can take you back to that 2020-21 offseason when you got hired, I wonder how much different is the organization's pitching philosophy now from what it was, and how much, is there something that you set out to sort of to help define what the Phillies stand for in terms of pitching that you've been able to do?
Yeah, a lot has changed. I think the thing that comes to my head first is I have a lot of help. And the Phillies and John Middleton, Dave Dombrowski, Samfol, Preston Mattingly now are all our AGMs. Like they provide a ton of resources for us to, ask good questions and investigate and just we're in the business of helping pitchers kind of knock the pens down nowadays. Like we're the bumpers in the bowling alley. We're trying to get them to where they want to go individually, and where we want to go is to win a world championship. So, I think I only know what I know. And and I'm a product of who I've been under and who's coached me. Derek Johnson with Cincinnati, he was my college pitching coach in college, and I'd be lying to say if a lot of what I believe in at its core of pitching is not from him. I've taken things from from a Tom House, from a Brent Strom, from guys at conferences, Lance Wheelers of the world. You're always trying to evolve, but at its core, pitching is you versus a batter. And when I got the job, everyone says the same thing essentially. Like we all know that's the job, but can we make a huge bet that is the job? And we want to pour all resources and have all roads leading to you making a quality pitch to get a hitter out. So there's a mindset component. There's pitching with an edge. There's just what is it to be a competitor? Because another thing a lot of people will say is that Philadelphia is a tough place. Philadelphia is the best place. It's a petri dish to see what you're made of, and the fans ask a lot of you. The city asks a lot of you, but the game's asking a lot of you all the time. And it's no matter where you're at, it's kind of always on the line. So can we show up fully as a pitcher, as a pitching staff, as a pitching unit, to give the hitter and the other team as much as we possibly can of what we can give them? That's different than worrying about my delivery. That's different than worrying about how I feel necessarily, how the rubber is, how the dirt is, what the umpire, who's yelling at me. How much can we have that clear mind to make a decision to do it that way? And we have a tagline. It's PHAH. It's fearlessly attack hitters. There's an R-rated version. But it's to me, and I've explained this, to me, it's the ultimate respect that we can give the hitter. It's not a disrespectful thing. It's not a bravado thing. It's I want to give you everything I got. That's the heart of the game. The heart of the game is the pitcher has the ball, the hitter's in the box. I have 9 guys, or I have guys behind me. I'm one of 9 guys, and I'm trying to get you out. So, we do a lot of fancier things now than we ever have, and that's evolved. And we have different methods in the training room, the weight room. We have different ways of quantifying pitches and seam effects and orientation of this, and but all roads are leading to you making a pitch. And can you have everything invested in that? And one of the biggest things is health. So we're proud of keeping guys on the field, and we want guys pitching. And I think that's a big part of that mindset. It's you have to be on the field to get the opportunity to do everything I'm saying.
So we could spend a whole segment on several individual guys, but I'll just kind of rapid fire with you on a few. Zack Wheeler, right? So he's gone from very good to great over the last 5 years. In my opinion, best pitcher in baseball. I voted for him for the Cy Young Award last year. What makes him, in the opinion of people who know way more than I do about pitching, and people who I respect in the game, what do you think makes him, if not the best, one of the top 2, 3 in the game?
Yeah, he's a pitcher. I think it can come across a little in jest, but I think a lot of guys are doing pitching in some ways, and it's something we talk about with the guys. He is a pitcher. He embodies a pitcher. He's in the game. He cares about the run game. He won a Gold Glove. He if you watch a PFP station in spring training, he's doing it like it's very important. So I think he's layered, all those things on top of that. He's just a fantastic pitcher in the game. His stuff's great. His command's great. But I think he embodies, for me, I've learned a lot from him. And, coming up with the phrase, at the end of the day, I want to build in our guys world-class competitor with curiosity. And that's Zack to a T. He's the ultimate competitor. He cares about getting them out. He's not, when it comes down to it, he's not worried about this or that with his delivery. He has checkpoints. He knows how to make adjustments. He knows where he might trip himself up in his delivery. He knows how to go through that checklist, but he is a competitor at its core, and he will not back down. He will keep coming after you. And that's not just because he has good stuff. There's plenty of guys that have great stuff and similar stuff to Zack that, I say aren't all the way there yet from a competitor standpoint. And then he's curious. So you can see, kind of how he's evolved his arsenal. He's open-minded, but he guards what he is at its core. He's going to throw fastballs. He's going to throw 2 fastballs. He's going to come at you. But, the curiosity of how do I get a little bit better and find an edge every year. And that to me is the fearlessly attack hitters mantra or mindset. Yeah, we can slap it on a t-shirt, but Zack lives it. So I think that's the secret. If there is a secret, is that he's always in that mode and trying to find an edge to compete and get a guy out.
Yeah, and he talks about how much he's learned from you. It's funny. It's interesting to hear that it's reciprocal. But he talks about all of that, like what he's learned from being around you, and maybe the analytical side that he wasn't as into before. I think some of the curiosity stems from that, and I wonder, still he's going to pitch off the fastball for sure, both fastballs, the sinker and the four seamer, but he added the sweeper. He's used the splitter more now. Like, I think that's what you're talking about, right? When you mentioned curiosity. And is he more of a pitcher now than he was 5 years ago when you first got around him, rather than just, someone who could get by on great stuff? Does he pitch a little bit more now than he used to?
Yeah, I think especially, he's still fantastic, and from a physicality standpoint, he's still at the top of the charts. But he is getting older, and I think there are days where he doesn't have, the 99. I look like you go back to 21, and he still has a good fastball, but he's now, hey, when maybe the days that I'm 96, 97, can I understand, like, if that's from how my fastball is shaped and it's not spinning correctly, that's an adjustment that he can pitch with just as good of a fastball from a stuff perspective at 96, 97 at times than the 99s. But yeah, I think he's definitely more of a pitcher, but it's meat and potatoes, and it's layering on very simple things. He always had that competitive drive. The second I knew him, and it was there's an on ramp to get to know him, but that was what was most impressive early on in 21 when I first got here, is just how much he just wanted the ball. Let me just go pitch. And then, you're slow burning these things, you're serving his needs, and you just want to be ready. As a coach, personally, it's part of my why. It's you want to be ready with the information and a plan for when they need it, and not necessarily before they need it. So, problems got presented by the league to him that I needed this wrinkle or that wrinkle. We're kind of trying to think ahead with him on the back end and using some of our stuff so that when he's ready, we're ready to go on it. Or, the sweeper was a little bit more, there was a problem with his hard slider. It's a good pitch, but righties didn't chase it a ton. And when it was in the zone, there was a little more damage than you would expect for a guy of his caliber. So it's just kind of problem solving with him. He really wanted to split. So then we go investigate and we test a bunch of different grips. This year, he's focusing back on his hard slider and getting that to be very different than his cutter again, which was going all the way back, kind of the focus in 21. Like, that was kind of the one thing, just getting those to differentiate as much as possible. And yeah, I think he's always been a pitcher. He's just adding layers to his game that he can play. He can play different games to different types of hitters, and he doesn't do a ton of game planning, but he understands game planning. He'll say, I know on the podcast, it's all JT, and me and JT will talk, but he understands the game. There's an intuition level that he doesn't necessarily need some of these things that other guys need. But, we do the homework for him a little bit on the back end, and he cares about simple things. Like, he wants to know who the runners are. So he's going to lock that down because those are my runs. He cares about all those little things, but that's a cool thing. And a little bit on the game planning like that. That's something we do a lot of, because I do want the pitchers pitching free. I want them freed up to maybe think about controlling the run game a little bit. And JT's he's just an absolute, he's a weapon. It's a superpower we have as a staff, is just having JT back there and Stubby when they're so prepared that you can just trust them. And I guess it's not fall the fingers, but it's fall in the clicks now. So yeah, he's always been a pitcher. He's gotten better and better, and he's become even better at what he was already good at.
So I know that you get involved in terms of like, free agency and jumping on Zoom calls with guys who the organization might be interested in signing. But I'm curious, from a trade standpoint with Jesus Luzardo, how involved were you kind of in the conversations with the pro scouting staff and the front office before the trade came together? And then part two, is there something from watching him up close that you didn't realize when you saw him from the other side?
Yeah, so sometimes I'm more involved. Dave runs a really well-run pro scout meeting in the off season that I'm a part of, fortunate to be a part of, to listen to a lot of our pro scouts and how they see guys. And I've learned a ton from those meetings. Jesus is always the guy we kind of talked about, but I've admired him from afar. I loved it. He just always comes across as a bulldog, and he's coming at you. He's going to pitch hard into the righties, and it's something, Sánchez it's been a focus for Sánchez. It's something just a huge part of Rangers' success, and I just love watching him pitch. And this offseason, it happened quick, and it was a phone call and talked about it a little bit. Didn't do some, huge dive because I've already been such a big fan. So it was an exciting thing for a pitching coach to hear that we've got a really good pitcher. And I know he dealt with some injuries. And he had a tough year last year just from the physical perspective. But I think that what stuck out to me, or what has stuck out to me the most, is on top of that bulldog, there's a ton of feel in there. There's a lot of skill. There's a lot of skill of command. There's a lot of skill of manipulating the baseball. And he's as curious as they come, but he's done a phenomenal job. It's been very impressive watching him kind of operate in that curiosity side of this practice and, testing things, but also flipping the switch when he's in a game or throwing. Like we do some bullpens where we do a first half where we call it over the rubber, where we're working on something, then over the plate where we're facing hitters. And you can almost see the mindset shift in him. Definitely in live BPs and for sure in his game. I think that's what stuck out. I had an assumption that, he's a great pitcher. He probably can do things with the baseball, but sometimes those guys that are maybe a little more come at you, they don't have as much kind of hand talent in a way where they can manipulate the ball and try things and it works. But I mean, he's very good there. I mean, his bullpens have been incredibly impressive. It fits right in. We got a bunch of those guys. So he does bring an element to our team that is a little more of a bulldog type guy, but he's not a thrower. He definitely is a pitcher. And when he puts on the glasses, he becomes someone different. So he's been really impressive. And he's just fun to be around. It's just a cool dude. He knows who he is. There's not a lot of panic in anything he does. And he's a stud. It's been really fun getting to know him and just seeing, kind of where we can fit in and add to his game.
One of my favorite conversations that we had last year was about the best pitches thrown by each of your starting pitchers. And we spent a lot of time on Christopher Sanchez's changeup. And the thing that strikes me, though, about watching Sánchez in spring training so far is that for as much of a jump as he made last year, maybe there's still another level that he can reach, right? Like he's working now on, it seems like he's working now on maybe optimizing the velocity now that he's, harnessed the command. And maybe if you can combine those two things, like how good can this guy be? What's the ceiling really on Sánchez?
I don't know if there is one. I mean, I think there is a ceiling, but he's not going to throw 200 miles an hour. But it's easy, and it's not even a bad thing. It's easy to have a lot of success and be like, I just want to get back. Like if I can just keep this going. But I think conversations with Sánchez and it's a lot of ownership from him that the secret in the big leagues is you always have to get better because the league is getting better. The guy that's coming up is better. The hitters get better to you. So he didn't rest on it. And I think it's one of those off-season things where you have plans and you kind of see how guys come in, but there was no worry. I knew Sánchez was going to get after it, but it was still kind of jarring with like he's even more physical. He's even more like watching him work through a bullpen this spring, even compared to last year, compared to the year before. It's incredible. Like the assertiveness, the consistency, the just hearing him talk through a pen and talk to his catcher and hearing him think through something, like how clean and clear it is in his head on what he wants to do. That to me is it's one of the biggest biggest jumps he's made. So obviously he's gotten even more physical. He's understanding his delivery even more. And the beauty is, with such a simple plan with good pitches, like there's not a whole lot of planning with him. It's a lot of mix planning, like when we throw pitches versus where. He's just solidified a foundation that now he can kind of add a lot of different tricks and locations because the strike zone threat is there. He gets guys to swing out of the zone on pitches as good as anyone in baseball. So, now when we focus on, hey, we're going to really get particular and try to really dot up and into a righty, he knows exactly where that fits into his game. And he did it yesterday a couple of times, and it's making a decision to do something and then going and doing it. And if he doesn't do it, we can kind of iterate. It's like, well, that didn't work, so let's try this. Just a simple process for a pre-pitch, plan, but it's layered on top of a guy he's about as hungry as a pitcher if I've ever been around. And there's also this relaxation. There's this dude quality about him this year that's like, I can have some fun. There's a little bit more, even more joy, which he's a blast to be around. But he's come out of the gates really good. So there is an element of just let's keep him there a little bit. But he's insatiable. So he wants to be really good, and he wants to win.
Okay, let me get you out of here on this with another big picture question, kind of like we started. You alluded to it at the end of that answer. One of the more underplayed aspects of the last few years, at least to me, is how healthy the Phillies have been able to keep their pitchers relative to most other teams. So if you want to go find the nearest piece of wood to knock on, I totally get it and I understand. But is there something that's allowed you guys to be able to keep your pitchers on the mound and off the IL? I don't know if there's a secret sauce. If there was, you wouldn't tell me, I'm sure. But is there something you've been able to tap into, because the health has stood out? Like you just don't get guys who miss a lot of time. Ranger missing a little bit of time last year being one of the only examples of this. So how important is it? And then also, how is it that you've been able to keep these guys so healthy?
Yeah, I think it's a prerequisite. Like if you want to be good, you want to pitch. It's why we like looking at. I like looking at just kind of just Fangraphs WAR, because I think it's so indicative of kind of at its core what we want to do, or any type of hit-based WAR, because we want to have strikeouts. That's kind of stuff. We want to not walk guys. That's command and control. And then you need to throw a bunch of innings to accrue, so it's counting in that sense. So you have to be on the field. I think Aaron Nola is our generation's example of what it means to be a durable pitcher that's also very good. So he leads by example, and guys follow him. The routines that are implanted, there's just so many factors. I think there's that piece. There's Zack and Nola leading the charge. We've been fortunate to have some veteran relievers to kind of guide the young relievers. We have a manager that is in every medical meeting that we do daily. That's very, very aware of everything that's going on. So we're very intentional when and if we use guys, and we're okay with not chasing a win today to win a bunch of games down the road, because the goal is to get to the playoffs by winning a bunch of games and having that double vision. That's a different thing too. Like we want to operate this way. You want to get in, but you need to be able to hit the gas pedal in October. There's a front office component, kind of what I alluded to, of just providing resources and tooling. But Paul Buchheit in the training room and Morgan Gregory, I don't know how I would do my job without them. The workouts in the weight room from Morgan, and Paul's attention to detail in the training room, and the people around him, Joe Ross and Plummer, and really everybody. It's what do we need, and kind of changing this narrative that it wasn't really necessarily here, but that you stay out of the training room. It's the training room is a place to improve performance, so you're on the field more and you stay on the field. So all that wrapped up into we're consistently just trying to communicate really well, have the pitchers and players communicate to us and deal in the truth. I just need to know where you're at, for sure, so we can just make a decision with this all we're all pulling on the same chain, and we all want you on the field. So whether it's a rookie like Orion, just getting comfortable with reporting how he feels, and then you kind of live out that hey, I didn't get pulled off the field because I reported that I was maybe a little sore than normal, but I feel great today because I did that. There's this feedback loop that we're leveraging the people that are really smart in this room, but it's everybody, and especially the pitcher. The pitcher's at the center, and we're all hovering around the orbit of that routine to get better, but also stay on the field. So I think it's just something we live, because it's easy to say all those things. It's hard to live those in practice, but I'm proud of our process, and I'm really grateful to be under a manager and a group of people that it really matters to them. So it's not necessarily arbitrary rules to the bullpen. There's some nuance to it. There's people like, hey, when should we actually go back to back? When should we do 3 or 4? How will we know that we should give them a day versus not? And all these things are kind of leading to having our best guess on those answers. But there's no magic bullet. I wish there was. It's just a lot of basic stuff, just done relentlessly every day.
Yeah, Paul Buchheit and Morgan Gregory are two names that most fans probably don't know or are not at the top of their mind, but they're two of the most important people in the organization. So I'm glad you brought them up, and their staffs, because they to me, that's a difference maker when you can keep your pitchers as healthy as you guys have. Caleb, there's so
Absolutely.
much we didn't get to, from Andrew Painter to Taijuan Walker. Hopefully we can get you back during the season to continue the conversation. But for now, let me just thank you for taking some time with us and say how much we appreciate having you on Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Appreciate it, Scott.
Thanks again to Caleb Cotham for being with us. For our Reporter's Notebook segment this week, I'm joined by Inquirer columnist David Murphy. Murph, thanks for doing this.
Anytime, Scott.
So we're about halfway through spring training, and let's see, what's the most newsworthy event we've had so far? Probably some hijinks between Trey Turner and Max Scherzer at the expense of the Robo-Umps, I guess. But suffice it to say, it's been a drama-free camp, which is exactly what the Phillies want. Very general question for you to start out. What has stood out to you so far? Has anything kind of caught your eye here over the last couple of weeks?
Well, we said we weren't going to talk about Gabriel Rincones, but since you phrased it that way, yeah, I think in general, and this was something that we had talked about early in camp. I've been impressed by the kind of the floor or the baseline, I would say, of the Phillies minor league system under Preston Mattingly, and the improvement that has made over the last 3 or 4 years. And I think a guy like Rincones, a guy like Otto Kemp, who I'm actually in the process of writing about, and who just continues to hit everywhere he goes, whether it's whether it's Point Loma Nazarene University or the Grapefruit League. There's some guys beyond that. Everyone knows about the Aidan Millers and the Justin Crawfords and the guys who get on that Fangraphs top 10 prospect list, and even have a national ranking. But the Phillies do have they're building some internal inventory and some internal options that could play within these next 2 or 3 years. Rincones especially, last I checked, he had not hit another home run, but who knows? So it's 3 as far as I know.
Going out right now.
He's a guy, he's got some pedigree, and I've always liked the kind of cut of his jib, and he's a guy, he's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on. So I think, as you said, in this camp, with the relative lack of kind of prove it storylines, the young guys have been interesting to watch. I'll say I was also, I only saw Jordan Romano throw a couple times, but I was impressed by what I saw out of him. I don't know if you've seen anything different since the games have started, but he's another one of those high upside guys that was one of the top closers in baseball for 4 years. And, it'll be interesting. If things break right, this pitching staff and Caleb Cotham could look mighty good.
Yeah, Romano goes a long way, right, to making you feel either good about the bullpen
Mm-hmm.
or, let's get everybody on speed dial before the trade deadline to get some help in here. Let me ask you about this one. So at the general managers meetings way back in November, I asked Dave Dombrowski, looking around at the landscape, there are not a lot of really good outfielders out there that were available, not a lot of offense out of the outfield. Center field is kind of like a wasteland right now for offense. And I said, would you consider moving Bryce Harper back to the outfield and maybe signing a first baseman? Pete Alonso was out there this winter, and it just feels like there were maybe more options. Christian Walker was out there this winter, maybe more options at first base. And he said no. He said, we moved Bryce to first base. We really like him there. And then fast forward, and Harper gives an interview this week to The Athletic, Ken Rosenthal, and he says, yeah, I was sort of wondering myself, and I talked to the Phillies about, hey, just so you know, I'd be willing to move back out there if you need me to, if it helps you in another area. What did you make of that? And do you think we are done with Bryce Harper, the outfielder, or is this something to remember now in the future? Like, hey, he was willing to do it this year. He would be willing to do it again.
Well, since this segment is called The Reporter's Notebook, I guess we can take people kind of inside the sausage factory a little bit. I started laughing and you're grinning, kind of sheepishly at Harper's interview with Rosenthal, because you and I both stood in front of him not 2 weeks ago and listened to him declare that he's a first baseman, and then on top of what Dombrowski said, I don't know what your takeaway from that kind of 10-minute introductory interview we did with Bryce Harper at his locker, but my takeaway was there's no chance this guy's doing anything other than playing first base. So, and then Kenny, and we all love Kenny, but the guys save their best stuff for Kenny. So I don't know. That the answer is, being a sports writer, you talk to these guys, you talk to everybody, and you can end up just as confused about what reality is if you hadn't talked to anybody. So I have no idea. I think it would, put it this way, if there was an offseason to do it, and I wrote this at the beginning of the offseason, that life would be a lot easier if Bryce Harper would play, the position he was signed to play, given the first base options out there. Christian Walker, right-handed bat, correct?
Yeah.
Pete Alonso, right-handed bat, correct?
Yep.
Right? Alonso's right-handed, right?
Yes, he is.
Yeah. I mean, two guys who there were a couple others I'd sat down and looked at.
Yeah,
where it was like, oh man, if they had room for him, they'd kind of be perfect. But I don't know. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I think when it's relative to DHing, he certainly prefers to play first base. He does not like DHing. I am a first baseman, right? That's kind of what he told us. I want to play first base as often as possible. He thinks that he can win a Gold Glove at first base, and that would put him in. He thinks he can maybe win an MVP at first base. And if you win an MVP at two different positions, you're on a very, very short list of Hall of Famers who've done that. So, I do think he likes the idea of being a first baseman now in the second half of his career. That said, we all know Harper is very aware of what's going on the market in the offseason. We know this. We know that he has recommended players to the Phillies before. We know that he's lobbied for guys before. And I do think he was aware, like most of us were, that when you went out there and you looked around, there were not a ton of outfield options on the market that were appealing, unless you were going to go trade for Kyle Tucker, or you were going to try to pull off something creative like that. Free agent wise, there certainly were not a lot of really appealing outfielders out there. So it doesn't surprise me that he dialed up Dave Dombrowski and said, just so you know, like, if you want to go sign Pete Alonso, I'm not opposed to going back out to right field, but I think it's all conditional. And, maybe next offseason, he looks around out there and, Vlad Guerrero's on the market, and maybe he makes the same offer, but so is Kyle Tucker next offseason, and he's an outfielder, and that would enable Harper to stay at first. I think he wants to win. I think he's very, very aware, hyper aware of what's going on the market, and I think he thinks a lot about this stuff. I know he does. He thinks a lot about, how the lineup could look if he's over here or if he's over there. So it doesn't surprise me that he made the call, but Dombrowski did not even vacillate back in November. It was like, no, we like him at first base. We moved him. We're keeping him there. And so I have no reason to believe, as much as Harper might say, put up his hand and go, hey, I'm willing. That's great. Thanks for being willing. We like to keep you at first base at this point. You're over, you're in your 30s. You're in the second half of your career. He wants to play for another 10 years at least. It's going to be a whole lot easier to play for 10 more years if he's a first baseman than if he's running around right field.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, even more generally, I mean, it's something that I've thought about several different times over the last couple of years. Uh, you look over in Los Angeles and you see Mookie Betts playing, every position except for catcher.
Right.
Not long ago, the Cody Bellinger was the talking point about how guys, positional versatility is a good thing. It can help a lineup. It behooves players to be able to play multiple different positions. I don't know if the Scott Kingery thing just scarred the Phillies forever, or I've never really understood the hesitation. I think, and it's pertinent this year, given the situation in left field, given the need to maybe manufacture another right-handed bat at times. What's the harm in Trey Turner, playing a grapefruit league game in center field or left field and just seeing if that's an option, especially in a playoff environment where it's kind of all hands on deck, we used to see that all the time with Chris Bryant going to center field and Schwarber even, I think, early in his career was kind of bouncing around a little bit. The Phillies certainly seem to have, a philosophy, and I don't know if it's a function of the players involved, whether they think Trey Turner, it would just mess with his head. If they started bouncing him around to places other than shortstop, but, with Aiden Miller coming up, potentially, faster than anybody would have thought, with guys like Rincones, they're getting to a point where it will be interesting to see if Miller is a shortstop, if he is a third baseman, if, Turner can go to left field. You've written about Turner staying at shortstop and the possibility of that, how long that will last. I think it's an interesting issue that may not really rear its head this year quite yet, but it's going to be something that I think the Phillies will have to do some serious thinking about that philosophy of theirs.
Yeah, look, with Harper, I wondered about it before last season when they decided to move him to first base, and I wrote about it. Like, what would be so difficult about X amount of games at first base, Y amount of games in the outfield,
exactly,
and then Rhys Hoskins was still a free agent at that point, and I said, well, that would enable you to keep Rhys Hoskins, who was an important right-handed hitter in the lineup.
Yep.
And he'd be able to split his time between first base and DH. Schwarber would be able to split his time between the outfield and DH, and you can sort of rotate the three of them in your lineup. And for whatever reason, the Phillies just don't, with veteran players, they don't like to pinball a guy around the field. They might prefer to do it with a younger guy if it helps them get a younger guy to the big leagues faster. But with an older established guy, whether it's Trey Turner staying at shortstop and not bouncing around at all, or Harper being exclusively a first baseman, not even thinking about moving him back to the outfield, that's kind of their philosophy, I guess, when it comes to older guys who are kind of more established and set in their ways.
Yeah, totally get it. But yeah, I mean, it's to your point, you think about all the kinds of different situations that could arise. Let's say you're facing, a righty who throws a devastating slider, and is there an opportunity to put Bryce in right field and Schwarber at first base, and have a new left-handed DH, something like that. That's the kind of stuff that they really haven't done, and I'm sure there's a reason for it. Obviously, I think Thompson has a very keen sense of his players, and what juice is worth the squeeze and what juice is not worth the squeeze. And same thing with Dombrowski. So, look, these are creatures of habit. We might not understand the difference between hitting second, third, and fourth, but Bryce Harper sure does. And he knows what works for him, kind of thing. So, at a certain point in time, though, when you're trying to find value at the margins, to quote our old friend Gabe Kapler, this is the kind of thing that you look to do.
Okay, let's put a bow on it with this. Kyle Schwarber, JT Realmuto, Ranger Suarez. They're all eligible for free agency after the season. I know we're getting way, way ahead of ourselves here, but I love talking about extensions and I love talking about the future. Rank those three in terms of most to least likely to be a Philly at this time next year.
Who was the third? Suarez,
Schwarber, Realmuto.
Schwarber and Realmuto. Well, I mean, I think Schwarber you have to put number one. Just because of his impact, both at the plate and in the clubhouse. I mean, he really is kind of one of those identity type guys where there's value there even above and beyond whatever production he puts out there every day. And that being said, that production is quite useful. So I think Schwarber would be number one. Suarez, I think it all depends on what I kind of think the writing's on the wall there, because if he goes out and has the kind of year that everyone's looking for him to have, he's probably going to be too expensive for them. If he throws 200 innings and a 3.25 ERA, I just don't know the Phillies, given their finances, can afford the kind of contract that some team is going to give him for that, given what we've seen. So I'm always a fan of starting pitching depth, so I would put him second, and maybe even first if not for kind of the unique situation that the Phillies are in, especially with Luzardo now. And then Realmuto, look, to me, he's one of the big question marks, of this season. Great guy, great player, great catcher, but he was a premium bat at a premium position. And now he's kind of, devolved into something less than that. You're not necessarily getting the bang for your buck out of catcher the way you were. And that was one of the reasons why the Phillies lineup was so good, was that they were getting, a power position kind of bat at catcher, and it'll be interesting to see if he can get back, get back to that spot. Still a very good hitting catcher, but not the 20 home run guy that you just penciled into the middle of the order and said, there's my 5-hole hitter,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I hear you. And now, having said that, I'm going to go Realmuto, Schwarber, Suarez. And the reason why, I mean, all the things you just said about Realmuto, completely true. He also turns 34 this month. The history of 3-year or longer contracts for catchers in their mid-30s is a very, very short list. We're talking Yadi Molina getting a 3-year, $60 million deal about 6 years ago. Now, I think that deal was done. Carlos Ruiz got a 3-year deal when he was 34. That did not work out well for the Phillies.
Nope.
But all of that said, who's going to catch? I mean, organizationally, they really don't have an heir to Realmuto, not right now. Eduardo Tait is 18 years old, so he's years away from being ready if he's ever, going to be the future big league catcher. And you go out there and you look at what's on the free agent market next year. It's not all that appealing for catchers. Mm-hmm. So organizationally, positional scarcity, I put Realmuto at the top. I almost think their hands are tied. He's extremely valuable for what he does in terms of leading the pitching staff. You heard Caleb Cotham in our interview call him a weapon, and he said that it's almost a superpower for the pitchers to have Realmuto back there. That all rings to me like, hey, look, we're going to have to pay the piper to keep this guy around because of what he means to us. It's not going to, maybe it doesn't look great in year 3, but it's something that we have to do now to get us to year 3, to be the bridge to get to whoever's next. If Logan O'Hoppe was still around in the organization, then be different. You'd have your successor right there. So he's number 1 for me. Schwarber's number 2 for all the reasons you cited, putting him at the top of your list. The leadership, the culture, and the production. He's got the 3rd most homers behind Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani since 2022. That's pretty good company to keep. And for me, Suarez is 3rd. Again, like you said, the writing's kind of on the wall. If he goes out there and he has a great year, well, he's going to make a lot of money, and he's probably going to be from somewhere else. They've already got Luzardo, Andrew Painter coming along. So I think they can withstand, losing him or most easily replace him in their rotation because their replacements are already on hand. So that's my list. We'll see how it goes. Maybe one of them signs an extension and doesn't even get to free agency. Maybe they keep all 3. We'll see. But we'll have to end it here for the week. Murph, thanks so much for doing this, for hopping on, and I'm sure we'll see you soon.
Anytime, Scott.
Okay, let's quickly move to our last segment. We call this Hit and Run, and we'll take a question or maybe it's more of a comment, from a loyal reader, Adam Konigsberg, who asks, what are they going to do with Walker and Painter come midsummer? Here's a thought, a 6-man rotation. That would make them fresher come the playoffs, allow the starters to go deeper in the playoffs, and reduce the innings of the relievers. Adam, assuming everyone's healthy, I do think the Phillies will move to a 6-man rotation at some point during the season, even if it's just for a short stretch. Rob Thompson has already mentioned it as a possibility. It would stand to benefit Ranger Suarez and Jesus Luzardo in particular. Both of them are coming off seasons in which they were compromised by injuries in the second half. And if a 6-man rotation keeps them fresher and enables the Phillies to ease Andrew Painter into the mix, so much the better. But of course, everyone has to be healthy. We know that injuries are common, especially among pitchers during a long season. And if the Phillies get to the middle of the season and they have 6 or 7 starters and they're worried about how are we going to get innings for all these guys, well, that is a first world baseball problem that they will happily address. Thanks to Adam for the question. If you've got a Phillies question and you'd like me to answer it on an upcoming show, please, you can hit me up on X, Blue Sky, Threads, the social media platform of your choice, or just send me an email at slauber@inquirer.com. Lastly, a program note. If you've missed any of our previous shows, including my interviews with Cole Hamels, JT Realmuto, Kyle Schwarber, or Larry Boa, you can check them out by clicking the Phillies tab on Inquirer.com or going to the Inquirer's YouTube channel. That'll do it for us this week. Thanks again to Caleb Cotham, David Murphy, and of course, our producer, Angelica Irizarry, for putting this all together every week. Until next week, I'm Scott Lauber. Thanks to everyone for listening, watching, reading, and following along.